We're moving on to agenda item 20D. This is the OPES presentation on examination performance. Thank you.
Or whoever has it loaded.
I got it. I got one.
Thanks.
So you might have to go into your, it should pop up, or you might have to go into your display settings. It should be on your session.
Good thing we're on a laptop.
You might have to turn
Yeah.
your display settings to mirror the second display.
I'd actually rather it not mirror so that
there
I
you
can
go.
present to
Slide
that.
for a second.
Yeah, let's give me a second. Slideshow. Yeah. Our aim's a little off, but aside from that.
See if I can zoom out. Are you full screen on there?
I am full screen on here.
Let's look cut off. Any settings that we can exit full screen, see what that fixes it. I know the resolution on this is not very well.
I can go here. But that's not the way we want to do it.
The board should have it.
Yeah,
the board should have it, yeah.
You guys have, do you guys have this in front of you? Fine, okay.
Well, I mean, they should have it in their materials for
Okay.
the meeting, but, okay.
I promise there's nothing
Okay.
critical in that last 5%, guys. It's gonna be okay on the right. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's cut off a little bit. All right, we're good to go? Can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. All right. So I'm here to talk about some factors that affect the California pass rates for the examination for professional practice and psychology. In order to do that, the board kindly supplied us with, or the board staff, I'm sorry, supplied us with 20 years worth of data, which was crunched, scrubbed, and otherwise analyzed. As a quick introduction, we are the Office of Professional Examination Services. This is Dr. Heidi Linzer, Dr. Robert Calvert. We exist mainly to consult on psychometric issues, so things that relate to examinations. We also develop your state law and ethics examinations. Quick overview about what we're going to do. I'll discuss the purpose. We'll talk about the variables that I analyzed, how I prepared the data, what trends we see, and then there's going to be a little bit of time for questions afterwards. I already told you who OPS is. The purpose of today is to examine this data. There's no way that we'll be able to talk about causation in any way. That's not the type of study this was. This is really just looking back over data and talking to you about trends. I do want to talk for a minute about what variables I used. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on why I used them and what I used. So the first is it was believed or presented that APA accreditation may have something to do with the pass rates with California. California allows people who had not gone to APA accredited schools to take the test, and other states do not. So that had been put forward as a possible explanation. Therefore, the first variable we look at is what school a person attended. Is that school currently APA accredited? And I want to point out that's a minor flaw in the study. I don't know if it was APA accredited at the time that student went there. I just know right now, is this APA accredited or not? So that's the first variable. The second is to break it down even more minutely, to talk about the school. What school did they attend? As a spoiler, there are significant differences by what school you attended and how well you do on a test. That should surprise none of us. I then took Alliant and pulled them out separately, not because I want to push any light on Alliant, but because they're a very large school. They take up a large number of your candidates, and they are APA accredited. So it was a good group to kind of compare back and forth. And then the last two I looked at were the age of the candidate at the time they took the examination and the degree that the candidate earned in order to qualify for the examination. This is the first chart I created in looking at this data, and I want you to just understand that's how I felt initially. So With that, there was a lot of data that needed to be cleaned up. It's really important, by my view, when you give reports on data to explain what you did to the data. So this is my report to you on what I did with this data. If there was a score below or equal to 200, I removed it. You get a score of 200 by showing up and taking the test and not answering anything, or not showing up. So those were removed. I removed entries with missing birth dates, with missing schools or scores or degrees. There weren't a ton of those, but I did. I removed entries that had clearly incorrect information, which is to say someone who was born in the future. There were not many of those, but I did remove them. I also consolidated degrees. We had codes that came in as like a PsyD 1 versus PsyD and a PsyD 2, and that just has to do with how the data was stored in the database. I collapsed all that down into PsyD, the same across the board. And then some schools changed their names through time, and where I could find that that happened, I consolidated that as well. And then I had to go through and add the school information. So that's where I went through and searched up. APA publishes what schools are APA accredited, so it was very easy to just go through and take their publication and mark it as APA or not. Okay. You're going to see these words a ton, so I'm going to slowly go over them a few times. It's important to me to cut up data in different ways. Sometimes we're measuring an attempt on a test. The same person could attempt a test multiple times, but it's the same human. So are we thinking about attempts on a test, or are we thinking about people? So when we say a first attempt, a person can only have a first attempt once. It's a measurement of a human. A candidate's best is still only once. Your best score ever is still your best score once. But attempt variables, you could have 50 attempts, and each one of those is counted. So I break it up into these three categories so we can understand the difference between the test itself and taking a test, an attempt on a test, and what happened with a person. Most of the time, the only one of these that's reported is the first attempt, just so if you were to compare over to other literature, that's standard practice. But because I have the data, I can cut it up these three different ways. My first section here is just going to talk about trends. This isn't separating data in any way, shape, or form. It's just telling you what's happened over time with this exam. This is your average score. It's important to know that during this entire time frame, passing is 500. That doesn't move. So from the beginning to the end, what it meant to pass was 500. This is your average score for a first attempt. This is a scaled score. We have clearly dropped over time. I'm not needing to talk about that. Here's your average score for your best attempt. Now, you'll notice that this bottom is still 540. Your best attempt is still well above passing, and you're going to find that out throughout every way we cut this. Most people will eventually pass, regardless of where they went to school, regardless of their accreditation. But it has gone down. And your average score for all attempts is actually well below passing at this point. We passed passing in 2015, and it just keeps going down. This next slide is to show the difference between an attempt and a pass. So the blue line is every attempt by your first attempt, and the yellow line is the pass. So the distance between those two are the number who attempted and didn't pass. The reason I bring this up is to kind of see that that distance remains relatively constant. It increases a little bit throughout this whole time period. So even though the overall trend is going down, the underlying phenomenon appears somewhat stable. I want to contrast that to the best attempt line. Just look at the distance between the two lines. Your best attempt is very commonly your pass. Very few people have a best attempt that isn't a passing attempt. And again, that's going to be true as we push through this data as we cut it up. However, the distance for all attempts has gotten much, much larger. What that means is that people are taking this test a lot of times that don't pass. Those people who do not pass on their first attempt are likely to attempt many, many times. And that's changed. That wasn't true back in 2002. Okay. This last one is just talking about pass rate. We've basically moved from a pass rate on your first time attempt of 80% down to 60%. Your best attempt remained relatively consistent in the mid-90s up until about 2018, remarkably close to COVID, at which point it dropped down, but only drops down to 86%. I realize that looks somewhat precipitous as a drop, but still most people are passing. The other thing I want to point out is every other chart I've shown you goes through 2022. Why then does this stop at 2020? stops here because this is the measurement of your best attempt. If I go right up to now, you haven't had time to get a best attempt. So we can presume by cutting off that last little bit that I'm actually measuring what's occurring for the individual. If I didn't cut that last off, it drops down to the same as what a first attempt would be, because it is now measuring really your first attempt. And last, here's your pass rate for all attempts that went from close to 70% back in 2002 to a current 40%. Again, this is the one that's low, the all attempts, the person who takes the test over and over again. Some general observations I've already said, but I'll say them again. The number of candidates has increased over time, just the sheer number of people who are taking this test. The pass rate has decreased over time, and the average score, whichever way you cut it, has gone down over time. Okay. Now we're going to talk about APA. Here are your scores by APA for your first attempt. As a spoiler, yes, not APA is lower, but it's only slightly lower. This does not explain in any way the difference in California's pass rate for a first attempt. In fact, during some of the years, the non-APA was higher. When we look at your pass rate, which is different than your score, the pass rates also have remained relatively close throughout time. And yes, non-APA is lower, but it isn't the dramatically large amount lower that it would take to be like the smoking gun. Now, this is the one that I think is my most important slide for you here, and that is the number of people who are not APA who are taking this test has gone down dramatically. The vast majority of your candidates are APA. So we put those two things together. Pass rate for APA and not APA close, not APA is lower, and there's very few people who are not APA, means it can't be the APA accreditation that makes California's pass rate lower than other states. It doesn't add up. All right, this is your score by IPA on your best attempt, and again, these remain very close to each other throughout your time, and I do cut it up to best attempts, and it drops a bit as we get closer. And your pass rate by best attempt still is in that mid-90s. It dropped recently, but not large enough, again, with the sample size to make your answer. That's the same thing I just talked about. Score by APA. And this is our all attempts space. And in this one, the non-APA is, 50 points lower than the APA. That's a little bit more. And as we push into the data, you might find that those people who attempt this examination many, many times might be more likely to come from a non-APA school, which was what would show up here. But again, the number of people is relatively low, and the score when we look at first and best attempt is close. And our pass rates. Okay, I just went through that. Number of candidates by APA, I already did. And this is the all attempt. So this is just measuring all of the attempts, and you actually have a few more attempts here from your non-APA. In other words, more people are taking the test a lot who went to non-APA schools. All right, some general APA observations. The scores from candidates attending APA accredited programs are slightly better than those from non-APA programs, but the eventual pass rate is pretty close. As time passes, the performance decreased for both groups, and the vast majority of your candidates today attend APA accredited programs. So if it's not APA, what's the difference? And I have a blank slide. All right, schools. My short answer to you is, surprisingly, there is a large difference, not surprisingly, obviously, but there is a large difference in performance based on school. There are many schools. I could have had a graph that had 50 lines on it. It would be very hard to read. I selected a few schools to get across the general idea. So in this case, I have Alliant, which is your little blue line there. It's the third. It's not terrible, not great. I took UCs. They're the green line. I took every UC that we have. I clumped them together. It's a total of about 30 students a year. They do remarkably well. They also don't put out very many students. And then I have the Chicago school, which is that yellow line, which is heading down to the bottom. And we can kind of glance through this and say, okay, over time, UCs have done well. They've done well when this test changed, if it changed, but throughout time, UCs still perform really highly. The Wright Institute, which is the red one, also relatively consistently performs across. However, Alliant and the Chicago school have a trend down over time, just on their score. This is a few more graphs to mess with you. We don't need to think about what all of those lines are so much as that there's kind of clearly this group at the top, which is, I could read them for you, but these same schools, your UCs, your Wrights, that are all throughout the time kind of staying up there. And then we end up with other schools that are dropping down. And this is your first-time pass rate. So we end up with these like 80 to 90% first-time pass rates, and then we've got 40% first-time pass rates. Okay, well, we know that a person who's going to attempt the test multiple times is likely not do well multiple times, and that's going to get you a difference relatively quickly. You'll notice Alliant, which has the vast majority of your students, ends up with a first-time pass rate around 50%. Alliant is the blue line at top, which has all of your students as compared to every other school below. This is just a measurement of the number of students that go to these schools. So when we kind of consider the second largest in this list is Chicago, which is the one that was doing pretty poorly in my previous. So your top two schools by candidate are scoring middling to slightly below middling on this test, and that's a lot of people. All right, score average, school best attempt. This is your best attempts. Well, in your best attempt land, you still get this little clump at the top of the schools that are doing well. They're passing at a high percentage, and then you have your second kind of tier of schools that the best attempts are right around passing. Okay, well, if your best attempt is right around passing, you probably didn't pass the first time, and you're probably taking this test a few times in order to get to your best attempt. This is school average going back to my few charts for your best attempt. Chicago's average best attempt is slightly below passing. Alliance is slightly above passing, and then you end up with your UCs that are so far above passing it's not worth comparing. School pass rate, again, by your best attempt, and we end up with the same scenario, that you end up with your lower schools that are kind of in that 70s, and your good schools still remain in the high 90s throughout the time. Let's get past that. We already talked about the numbers. School average score, all attempts. So, of the three options, all attempts is probably the least helpful because it's not measuring a person, it's measuring sitting down and taking the test once. But in this all attempts category, both Chicago and Alliant have an average score below passing. Your two largest schools, by attempt, not passing. G is not accessible for anyone. Oh, it didn't show up on your guys' screen. Sorry. I have an error on mine. I'm trying to get it to be quiet. All right. So, some trends there. There's a clear relationship between what school someone attends and their performance on the examination. Different schools have a different trend. Some of the schools were able to remain consistently high performance with their 30 students a year. Other schools have trended down over time. Just the sheer number of candidates, Alliant has more students than the next 5 largest schools. One of the next largest schools is Chicago, which also wasn't doing exceptionally well. Now I want to talk about Alliant for a second, just taking out this group. So I have Alliant and not Alliant that I'm comparing to each other. And this isn't because I want to throw Alliant under the bus. I just want you to see the trend over time. And the trend over time is that Alliant has trended down faster than not Alliant has, just in terms of their average scores. And this is by your first attempt. The pass rate, similarly, has trended down for Alliant faster than not Alliant. And the number of candidates by Alliant versus not Alliant has actually gone down over time. In other words, Alliant has less of the pool than they used to. Just contextual information. Now, when we consider your best attempt from either school is still likely passing, whichever way you want to cut it up. And this is the pass rate, which really stay really close to each other. The eventual pass rate for your best attempt is, I'm not going to say identical, but pretty nearly identical. So when we're measuring people, people eventually pass. When we're measuring sitting down and taking the test, there's a difference. Score by line, all attempts. It's a similar thing. Pass rate, all attempts. Okay. So when we look at this all attempts category, for both groups, we've trended down from 60 to 70-ish% down to the 40 to 30-ish%. That's the same thing you're going to see other ways we cut up this data. Okay. Some observations about Alliant. The comparison shows that Alliant is doing slightly worse than not Alliant, but over time both groups have trended down. And over time, Alliant takes up a smaller portion of your candidate pool than they used to, even though they're still very large compared to other schools. Okay. This age category is, how am I doing? Where's my timer? Okay. Breaking down this data by age, I want to explain kind of why I did that and what's going on here. So instead of taking equal ranges and saying 25 to 30, 35 to whatever, I took all of the data by attempt and I just made them into 8 equal categories. So why I did that is to show that there are small differences just in a year or two between when you take the test. And then we have to consider that. Well, your goody-goody student who went and got their bachelor's degree, then they did the master's, then they got the PhD, then they were already set up to go and get their hours, and they were right on time, shockingly does really well on the test. However, just 2 years later, 3 years later, you can see a difference. Well, what does that mean? That means somebody at some point in there got distracted. Not distracted maybe, but got thrown off of what that kind of like normal ideal-ish course is. And we can continue to see that there is differences by these age groups throughout our time. We can also see, and I'll just give the spoiler, that across every analysis, the older you are, the worse you're likely to perform on this test. That does not mean the test is ageist. I did not run that analysis. I cannot make that claim. That's not what this does. But it does tell you that the person who's choosing this as their second profession is not very likely to do well on this standardized test. Also, though they make up a relatively low number of total people, candidates, they make up a large section of attempts. Which is to say they take the test many, many, many times. So, with that said, if I was to examine this graph, things I want to point out for you that I believe are important. If we go back to 2002, and you look at that pass rate for all ages are above 500. The beginning of this chart, everything's above 500. Every group's average first attempt is passing. However, today, the first attempt for that oldest and second oldest group is 50 or more points below passing. That is a dramatic difference in outcomes for people. I'm going to go to best attempt. I just skipped a few. And I want to talk about this pass rate for first attempt. So, again, back in 2002, approximately 70% of the oldest candidates were passing. Today, on their first attempt. Today, it's between 30 and 40%. Whereas our youngest candidates have stayed pretty stable. Back in 2002, they were 85-ish%. Now they're 80-ish%. Okay. So things have moved through time, but they move differently for different ages. Okay. Now this one's a mess. So all I'm going to point out for you is recall that the number of candidates in the oldest group is relatively low. They are tied currently for the most attempts. In other words, few people are taking this test many times, and they're continuing to fail. Sure, it might not be verbatim. Few people are taking the test many times and continue to fail. And they're old. Older. I was corrected. Older. They're in the, yeah, we'll just go with older. All right. Where was I want to pick a slide because I want to talk and I want the slide to have something to do with what I'm saying. We'll go with pass rate, best attempt. I like best attempts. Do I not have? I don't have best attempt here? Okay, that's weird. All right. We can imagine many things that are different about a candidate who is taking this test between the ages of 46 and 80 than there is the person between, 20-something and 35. They've just had likely very different life experiences. I want to emphasize as much as I can that I cannot in any way say that there's anything about this test that is unfair to older candidates. That's not my analysis. There is a way to run that analysis. I don't have the data to do it. However, it is clear that the trend has changed and that the performance of the oldest groups has decreased greatly over time, whereas the performance of the youngest groups has remained relatively consistent. That's my best summary of that. As age increases, overall scores tend to decrease. As time passed, performance decreases for all of the groups, but for some groups a lot more than others. And I've said this, but I'm going to say it again. Difference is not bias. There is a difference here by age. That is not a bias by age. There are ways to find that out. We have not done that. We're sure that there is a difference by age here. We have no evidence of bias. Okay, moving to degrees. Short answer for degrees. PhDs, being slightly biased myself, do better than EDDs. And PsyDs. But PsyDs and EDDs perform relatively similarly. EDDs do worse. And there are very, very, very few EDDs who take this examination. That's all. There's nothing more to say about degrees. Very, very few EDDs. Yes, on average, they do worse. However, some pass. They have a pathway to be able to do so. If you're moved to the pathway, none of them would pass. Yeah, PhDs. Oh, and the other thing is that the number of PsyDs has increased over time, which I think we all knew. All right, a summary. There's evidence that this test has changed over time. The school a candidate attends is a strong predictor of examination performance. Most candidates attend APA-accredited programs today. Those programs perform slightly better than the non-APA accredited programs. Older candidates pass the examination at lower rates, and they account for a large proportion of recent attempts. Not candidates. There's relatively few candidates there, but many attempts. And the degree type has moved a little bit over time, but PhD, then PsyD, then EDD is a consistent pattern. Thank you. And do you have any questions? I'm 3 minutes under time.
Thank you so much. You presented this data during the licensing committee, and still fascinating. I love this data. It's just incredibly fascinating. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked in the licensing, because I'm assuming there are some people in here who might project that COVID might have hit some of those dates. So tell us about that.
Give me a second, because I like charts. Let me find one that, I'm not even going to cut it up. Sorry. We'll go with first attempt. That seems good. Do you guys see what I have up there, or are you just looking through your chart? Can you see? Oh, I'm sorry, I went all the way to the beginning. I'm an average score for first attempt is what I pulled up. So it's like the 7th slide or 6th slide, something early. And the reason I pull that up is just to back up what I'm about to say. This change appears to have started around 2014, 2015, which is prior to COVID hitting. There is another drop around 2019, 2020, but a pretty substantial drop occurs prior to that.
Thank you. Any other board comment? I assume there's some questions, perhaps. Mr. Fu?
I suspect I'm going to get reprimanded for my question, and I welcome it, Dr. Calvert. So the exam is a knowledge-based exam, and there's an introduction of a skills-based exam that is forthcoming. Are there particular aspects, observations that one can make about a knowledge-based exam relative to the insights you've shared with us today that might change in a skills-based exam based on your experience at OPES?
I won't reprimand you, but I can't give you a good answer either.
Thank you.
I would say that I'm certain there's a large amount of research that talks about those differences, and that I don't have it at my disposal to answer your question.
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the chart that you pointed out, the first attempt chart where there are drops, and it seems like there's a drop around 2008 and around 2020. Is that kind of like?
Your average score for first attempt, is that the one you're looking at?
Oh wait, no, I'm looking at no, I'm looking at the. Sorry, I'm looking at the different.
I'll go to yours. I just need to know which
okay,
one you're
sorry.
talking about.
I guess I was looking at the first attempt candidates.
So that would be the number of candidates.
Yeah, the
who
number
were-
of candidates. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at that there's a drop in 2008 and around 2020. And I'm thinking, like those are the times when there's some financial, crisis that, is like, economic,
Okay.
economic factors. So I'm thinking that, maybe some of those do you think some of those have played a role in some of the data that
Can I
happened
just say
around
yes?
this time?
Yes, I think that many factors play a role in what these are going to be, and one of them that we know relates to school attendance and the way you're going to move through and whether or not you make it to this is what's going on in the economy. People go back to school generally when the economy is really bad because they're hoping to get a degree to go get a job. But it also would, I think, really depend on your field. So like psychologists is a different thing than going and becoming a welder. So I would need to look into it more to talk about it in more depth, but I'll start with a yes. I think that would have a effect.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, Dr. Rogers?
Thank you, Dr. Calvert. This was fascinating. I'm so thankful for this report that you put together and this robust analysis. I have a question for you about folks who do not pass the exam the first time. You mentioned that folks who don't pass the first time sometimes take it many, many times. Do you have a sense on average the number of times it takes those folks to eventually pass the exam? And does that change depending on age?
Yes, and yes. And I'd have to get you, I can get back to you with exact numbers.
Okay, that
but
would be really helpful.
Yes, the by attempt, if you don't disaggregate it by age, most people pass between their first and second attempt.
Okay.
If you were to consider it that way across all of them. Then if you just take repeat test takers, we get rid of everybody that passed the first time, it becomes like between, 2 and 4, depending on how you cut it up.
Okay.
The oldest group, when I ran this analysis, and I don't have the exact number for you, was substantially different than the others when I cut it up by age and by attempt. And I am happy to send you an email for that as soon as I'm done. It won't take me long to get you that info.
Okay. Okay. The reason that I'm asking about that is for two reasons. It's costly to take this test. And then if you have to take it multiple times, that racks up a bunch of fees. So I think about that in addition to the increasing cost of entering the profession. And now I'm also thinking about it with the introduction of the EPPP Part 2 in 2026 and the implications for that. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the number of times that non-first-time passers might have to be in this loop before they can actually enter into the profession.
Yeah, I can give you an email that gives you a quick answer to that.
Okay.
Secondly, if you wanted more analysis of it, and my boss says yes, I'd be happy to do that for you. It won't take me long to be
Okay.
able to cut that up.
Fantastic. That would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other board comment or questions? Dr. Cervantes?
Thank you for presenting this data analyzed in this way. It's very informative and helpful to us. You conclude that a school a candidate attends is a strong predictor of examination performance, and I know you didn't conduct this type of analysis, but we see this in other education research, and that is that admissions requirements to the various programs impact that
Very widely,
student outcome.
yes.
And so I just wanted to add that possibility. I know we can't conclude that from your analysis, but that's
You can infer that from this
a
analysis
very,
just fine.
but that's very likely an
Yeah.
influencer as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry. The microphones were echoing, so I had it a little bit away from me. Were you able to analyze for the older test takers how long the time span from their completion of their degree to the exam?
Yes, I was. It was one of the things that was removed from the already excessively long slide deck. So yes, I was able to analyze that, and the short answer was that it was relatively close to when they earned their degree, that they were doing their first attempt.
And they were still passing at lower rates?
They still have a substantially lower pass rate, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for that.
Any other board comment? Dr. Kasuga?
In the data that you have, do you have data around people that received accommodations
No.
when taking EPPP? So no.
I do not. The data I received was from the board, not from the vendor. So it would be what the board chose to supply. I can look back and ask if you have info on accommodations. I don't think so. I pretty much asked for all the information they had to crunch it. Well, I can tell you it wasn't in what we got. There's no question in my mind on that. Yeah, because the accommodation would likely go through the vendor, my guess, and they'll tell you later, is that they wouldn't have a record of it. If the accommodation went through for our test, for the state level test, we would know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Nope. Some boards do it. They'll answer.
Yeah,
don't.
I'm just wondering because that data would be interesting to look at as well.
Yeah.
Any other board comment or questions? I'd like to open this item up for public comment. If you do have a public comment. Nope. Hello, Dr. Winkleman. Do you want to come forward and have a seat? And make sure that microphone's pulled up, so, and on, actually. Is that on?
I think it's on, right?
Perfect, yeah.
Hi,
Pull it forward.
Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. Thank you for that excellent presentation. It was even good the second time I also listened to. Anyway, I hope I didn't miss the data on the question that I'm going to ask. I wanted to know, is there any way to determine the percentage of applicants who attended a APA accredited versus non-APA accredited school? I know you have the attempts, but do you or does the board have data that on what is the percentage of either applicants or licensees who are from accredited versus non-accredited schools?
Yes, is the answer to your question. We do have that.
Great.
This would give you, let me find it for you. This isn't a percentage. what I have up there for you. But that's the number of candidates on their first attempt. So over time, right now, the number from non-APA schools has gotten considerably smaller comparatively. I have the table that made that, so I can easily divide them out for you if you would like, and give you the percentages at any given point.
That would be terrific. Perhaps I can
Yeah, just hand me a card.
hand you a card later.
Yeah, easy.
Okay, very good. Okay. And in terms of the licensees, so these are the applicants. Does anyone have the data on the current licensees on there, whether they have graduated from APA accredited or non-APA accredited schools?
Yes, and I provided it earlier for Mr. John.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I'm asking this because, of course, it's relevant to our later discussion of SciPact, and I know a lot of questions have been raised in particular about that particular requirement, and knowing the actual numbers would be super helpful. So thank you.
Yes, I have the data. I also reached out to Dr. Calvert to try and determine if we could get an approximation percentage of the number of APA accredited versus non-APA accredited licensees that we have. It isn't something that we really track, so Dr. Calvert and I had a meeting and I sort of explained what we were looking for, and he was able to dig out what we have. And what we have is, I believe it was the number of candidates who have taken and passed the CPLEE examination. That's the closest we can get to try and determine what the current look of the licensing population is. And the data provided, I believe it was from 2002 to 2020.
22.
To 2022, so it was a 20-year. The total number we had was 5,861 people had taken it and passed. Of those, APA were 3,841, non-APA 2,020, which is about 66% APA versus 34% non-APA. However, as this dovetails with what Dr. Calvert's already said, that's not an exact representation of maybe what the overall licensing population is now, because if you go back to 2002, the number of non-APA was considerably higher than APA, and those numbers have switched over time. So now there's far fewer non-APA. Am I correct in saying that? I'm trying to nutshell what Dr. Calvert told me.
Yeah, the question is, we don't know what the accreditation looked like back in 2002 for these schools. So it could be that they weren't APA'd then, they are APA'd now. And we only have right now what is APA'd, which makes it likely an underestimate as to how many are non-APA'd, because that's the direction it would go. If you weren't APA'd then and you were now, you have a non-APA'd license.
Okay, thanks very much. I didn't
Okay.
memorize that, so I'm going to have to get the data from you all later. Thank you.
Take some notes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman.
Calvert sent me, so I'll send it to you.
Dr. Horn, do you have a public comment? Perfect. I saw a hand, but I can't see over the chair. Okay, thank you.
So, hi there, I'm Jackie Horn, psychologist in California, and I actually work on the EPPP, so this is, I also have attended both your presentations, excellent presentations. I really thank you for doing this deep dive. I just have a couple of points of clarification that I'd like to make, that I don't know the impact on some of the data, but I just want to say that. So first of all, you did by school. APA doesn't accredit schools.
It's by
It
program,
accredits
I'm sorry.
programs.
I'm sorry, it is accredited program, not accredited school.
Okay, okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. So I just wanted to make sure that these were accredited programs you were looking at. The other thing, a couple of other things. One of the, you were talking about like 2002 is, and why people are seem to be taking it more now, the exam more now. Prior to 2002, and the exam was became computerized in 2002, people could only take it twice a year. Now they can take it 4 times a year. So I think that might contribute to it. We also saw the same decrease in scores from COVID. And there's the ASPPB doctoral program report pass rates by doctoral program is online. And we broke it's a 5-year rolling pass rate chart. And we actually broke it down to the years right prior to COVID versus the years after COVID. All schools were affected by that. But the one more thing I wanted to point out too was that you showed the scores, and this is a pass-fail exam, so 500 is passing. It doesn't matter if folks get 520 or 540 or 500 and
625.
600, yeah. That doesn't matter. It's 500 is the passing score. So a lot of that, even though the actual scores have gone down, it looks like still the pass rates are
Because it's a
there.
scaled score,
Mm-hmm.
and it's scaled to the 500, which
Right.
is good, the way we report it. For the person, I absolutely agree. When you pass, you don't get your score.
Right.
However, to see the differences between schools, a school whose average score is 500 is very different than a school whose average score is
Absolutely.
650.
A
That's
pro-
why
a
I
program
include the
whose-
scores. Yeah,
whose
that's why
scores,
I
yeah.
include the scores.
Absolutely, yes. And wait, there was one more thing that I just wanted to clarify, but I can't find it, so. Again, thanks a lot. This was really helpful, and I would send everybody to just the pass rate charts so that you can see pass rates by program. Seem to, again, everybody was affected by COVID, but it looks like accredited programs were affected significantly less than, impacted significantly less than non-accredited programs, according to our information. So thanks everybody.
Go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Dr. Horn, just a clarification question. When you say significantly less, are you talking about statistical significance?
Mhm.
Okay. And do we know what your R was on that? Like, to what degree is that relationship explanatory based on your accredited program?
According to our information, our numbers look different than your numbers. So our numbers, and we do just accredited programs across the U.S. and Canada versus, just California. So the numbers across the United States and Canada are that graduates of accredited programs consistently have a higher pass rate. But there are certain programs, and a number of them are here in California, accredited programs, that have really been impacted negatively by COVID, but also never had as high a pass rate as other programs.
So let me ask my question just a different way,
Yeah.
and perhaps Dr. Linser and Dr. Calvert can
I
help
think
me.
you're looking for effect size. Is the
Thank
thing
you.
want to know.
That I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm interested, if you were to do an interaction variable between COVID and accredited program,
Yeah.
like what you would actually be able to see the effect size would look like based on that. Because when you said it was significant, that doesn't
Yeah.
quite have as much meaning to me when we're talking about that layering of interaction with COVID.
I think probably Dr. Song would have that number. I don't have that number, but I'm sure she's probably put that together.
Which one?
Thanks.
It's related to that. In your analysis, was Argosy considered APA accredited or not?
The Chicago one? No, Argosy is a different. So I can't answer that question. I think it'll take a little bit longer than I should right now. But I could answer it today and just send you an
Yeah.
email. I have it. I just I don't right now know that.
So the reason why I'm asking is because, like what you said earlier, that like the APA programs were considered, the programs were considered APA in your data based on if they were APA accredited. at the time.
Right.
And Argosy is one of the bigger schools before they closed down. And it will be interesting to see if they were considered APA accredited in your data, number one. And also number two, I just wanted to kind of make a comment on some of the schools, like what Dr. Horn said about some of the schools in California, and some of them are in California that may be APA accredited, but are have significantly lowered their pass rates and were more affected by COVID more than the other APA accredited schools. And I can speak to one school, which is John F. Kennedy University, which also went through a transition to national university. So there are other factors aside from COVID that we may not know that affected pass rates. So things like that, and things like, for instance, like the turmoil with Argosy and how those students at Argosy that are taking the test, how those changes affect maybe their studying, maybe their ability to kind of taking the test while they're still accredited. Those accreditation histories within those schools or their programs may affect the data in ways that, we don't know. So it's not all COVID, and, it's not all knowable. And that's why we have to always be cautious when we kind of look at, this pass rates and schools, even though there are trends that are kind of visible.
Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question based on Dr. Kasuga's comment?
Yes, as long as we can get back to public comment at some point.
Yeah. Yes. Dr. Calvert, those incidences or various items that Dr. Kusuga helpfully provided context for, those variables should be, when we're looking at a larger sample size, when you look across all programs, both accredited and non-accredited, those individual changes in a school's or a program's journey in terms of acquisition, et cetera, should be mitigated by looking at a larger sample size.
Correct.
So this data that you're presenting to us today, just by the power of statistics, would account for some of those changes that Dr. Kusuga indicated at an individual program level, correct?
Yes, it's highly likely that over a large enough sample, which we have a giant sample here, that small fluctuations would kind of come out in the wash. The answer to your question is Argosy was counted as APA in these records. The other thing I want to say as we're talking about schools is a thought experiment of if you took students from the UC and magically placed them in Alliant, and you took students from Alliant and magically placed them in the UC, do we think we would see the same trend? In other words, is the school really good? Or is it just that the students that go to the school are really good?
Thank you. I know there's a public comment. I saw a hand this angle. Can you please come forward? Yep. Please come forward. Have a seat. Sorry I missed you earlier. Yeah, just pull that microphone towards you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Howard, a licensed psychologist in California. I am happy with your presentation, and I love your sense of humor. It's really, really nice to see that. And I'm also happy I'm not taking the test now at my age. I may be trying about 10 times. I'm just wondering about causation, really. When you said something, I'm just curious about what we added to the test that made it more difficult over the years. Was there something we added so I'm just curious about that, if we know that, what we added that has made it more difficult. And if so, it looks like some of the schools are somehow not educating students to that particular topic. So I'm not sure if we added testing around DSM or other kinds of topics, but it looks like maybe some of the schools aren't presenting that in their graduate programs. So that's all. Just wanted to ask about that.
I would just say we did nothing with causation,
No,
so I
I
can't do
know,
anything
yeah.
there. I can say from our previous meeting that they changed their content outline in 2015, I believe, which was interesting that that matched up and chronologically with one of the drops. But that's just me reporting what the last person said, so
Okay.
not part
Thank
of my
you.
analysis.
Thank you for your comment. Was there a hand? Did you want to come forward, sir?
Hi, maybe just add a little perspective to the test that the EPPP test. I took it 2006, and I went to an APA accredited program. The amount, and I got the study materials from more than one place, and the amount of questions that were not covered in all the material that I studied were astounding. So how can somebody study for tests on material that they've never encountered ever in their life? And they can take their best guess and do their process of POE, process of elimination, but I mean, if you gave all these students all the possible things that are going to be on the test to study, I bet the test scores would probably be a little higher in first pass. But they don't. There's no possible way to do that because the material is so widespread and various. Just thought.
Good comment. Thank you, sir. Any other? Oh, go ahead, Dr. Phillips.
I was just going to point out that this is a general licensing exam. It's not just for clinical psychologists. It's for all people that receive a psychology license, and they come from different disciplines. So a lot of the domains that are covered in the test are not necessarily specific to clinical psychology. They're also in organizational psychology and experimental psychology and so on and so forth. So I think that, to a certain extent, means that for almost all of us that took the test, it was like, oh, holy shit. That's going to be an exam, huh? So it was a question of memorizing a lot of material we hadn't gotten in graduate school. And I do think a lot of graduate schools choose not to teach to the test. They teach what they feel best prepares people to do whatever the discipline is that they're preparing people to do. So
It'd be nice if the testing material that you can buy would at least be broad enough to cover at least the majority of what you're tested upon, because it doesn't even cover us, at least when I took the test.
and that has more to do with testing companies, which are outside the purview of the Board of Psychology and outside the purview of graduate programs or ASPPB.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Dr. Rogers, did you have a quick comment?
Yes, I'm really so thankful for this report. The low pass rates have been something I've been really concerned about for a while. So just to have it broken down by these categories, I'm just really thankful for that. My question is about, now that we have this information, we've had it at a committee meeting, now we're having it here at the board meeting. Is there any plan to share this information with licensees? I'm just thinking about our newsletter, for example, just so there's more information that's more broadly shared. Is there a plan for where this goes next?
Are you volunteering to write an article?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am, I am not.
Sounded like it.
I walked right into that one, didn't I? I do the wellness column. But I'm just wondering if this would, I mean, we could write something together.
A summary of the data.
Because I'm also thinking about the information from doctoral programs that Dr. Horn was talking about. I'm not sure if that's been covered in the newsletter, that report, just because I also found that to be really fascinating and super, super helpful just to see how it was broken down by school outside of California. So I just feel like this is such rich information that it should be shared broadly and widely. And if I need
it's
to,
amazing that you volunteered to create a summary for that to put in the newsletter, because I think I agree with you.
I wanted to echo Dr. Rogers and volunteer myself to support this initiative because I do think it is important consumer information to put out to applicants. They can choose to do what they want with it, but at least to know and understand where there are trends and what information they might use for their own preparation. So I'll help you out, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cervantes.
Any other public comment? Oh, in the back, please come forward, have a seat.
Good morning. My name is. Here? Good? Here? Good morning. I think it's still good morning. My name is Jayanthi Kasraj. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in California. I don't know if you got this information, but I'm really curious about gender differences, ethnic differences, and language.
I can answer one of the three. There is no significant difference by gender. We ran that analysis and removed it, and that's all there was to it. We don't have the information by race, so we can't analyze that. And we don't, as far as I'm aware, have the information by language, but I didn't have that in this analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, but women did
Oh.
perform slightly better than men. It just wasn't a significant difference.
That's amazing, but we knew it, though. So, we knew. Any other public comment? Is that a board hand over here? Yes.
It's very quick, just very quickly, and I just wanted to talk about the big elephant in the room when it comes to this test is like the role of test prep, the test prep industry as well. Like this test, unfortunately, cannot be passed like as well without buying those really expensive test prep materials. And it is a reality. It's a reality that's out there, and it adds another layer of financial burden to people. And sometimes it's even more relevant. I mean, it's not going to be shown in the data because we don't have that information. But like it's less about APA accredited schools or what program. It's more of whether you took the time to buy those test preps and prepare for the tests that way. And I feel like it's I feel like that it just has to be said too.
Thank you. Oh, I see Dr. Horn creeping back up here.
I'm sorry. I just want to make a comment about that. So to be clear, and thank you, Dr. Phillips, for saying ASPPB has nothing to do with those test prep companies. But I will tell you something that ASPPB does have, and they have sample exams, practice exams for both the Part 1 and the Part 2 on their website. And those, for the Part 1, actually for both parts, these are actual questions that have been retired from the EPPP Part 1. And for the Part 2, because it's not that old, these are actual questions that were written for the Part 2. And our research shows that people who take the practice exams, it's increased their increased their scores by all groups. For candidates of color, their scores increased by 20%. Their pass rate increases by 20%. So I'm just to let you know that, and again, because that's these are actual questions that have been on the exam. So it gives people, as you can imagine, facility with answering those kinds of questions. So, and cost of that is pretty minimal. If people decide to take those practice exams in the test center, so they'll have real world conditions, it's only the cost of the test center cost. So it's very, very minimal. So it definitely beats the really thousands of dollars that people pay.
I did take that test. Actually, passed it will be the first time, but failed the practice test. Just kind of like weird.
Glad you passed it.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. Any other public comment for this item? And I'd like to open it up for any public comment for agenda item number 20. I know we covered some items yesterday. I just wanted to make sure everyone was heard. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. We love this data, you can tell. Let's take a break for 10 minutes. We'll come back around 11:52.